Really excited to introduce to you all PJ Gubatina Policarpio, who is a friend of mine, and I'm really excited to get to collaborate with him on this panel. He is an educator, a writer, a curator, and community organizer with over 10 years of experience in museum education, youth development, public programming, and arts administration. We started working together when PJ was working at the Contemporary Jewish Museum, and I'm so glad that we get to continue working together now that he manages youth programs at the De Young Museum. Here I am letting more people in. Take it away, PJ.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna just prop my script. Hi everyone, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you Youth Art Exchange for hosting this panel and hosting this summit every year. It's really one of the best things for youth here in San Francisco, so I'm really glad to work with you all. As Sophia mentioned, my name is PJ Gubatina Policarpio, and I'm the manager of youth development at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, where I design and organize youth-centered programs and that welcome and support diverse voices and perspectives from around the Bay Area. And so such as this program today, I'm so thrilled to be joined by my amazing colleagues at the Fine Arts Museums today, Benjamin Shaykin, Francisco Rosas, Renee Villasenor, and Sarah Kleiner, to share with you all their stories and journeys from youth to the creative professionals that they are today. So let's see, can we have the... So I wanted to just outline our goals for today, which is, really to meet creative professionals, learn about various museum career paths and possibilities, gain insights on skills, experience, and education required for creative careers, and also to hopefully meet other teens and other youth who are interested in creative careers. So I really encourage you all, to ask questions and look for advice. Feel free to chat them out, or wait at the end for our open questions. So next. So a little bit about the, can you move back a little? Thank you. A little bit about the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. It actually comprises of two museums, the De Young Museum in Golden Gate Park and the Legion of Honor in Lincoln Park, which is, together one of the largest museums in the Bay Area. And then you can go ahead and go next. Together, the Fine Arts Museums collect and showcase artworks and objects from around the world and across time. This includes American art, African art, arts of the Americas, ancient art, to textiles, costume, contemporary art, graphic arts, photography. So really it's a wealth of resource and knowledge. So, feel free to hopefully visit us soon. And then next, this is one of our galleries. Next. The museum also provides a lot of ways to stay engaged and stay connected through education and public programs, events, and other initiatives, including our podcasts. Right now, all of our programs are online, so you can experience and engage with us in that way virtually as well. So make sure to check out our existing online social media presence. And next. And visit us so you can stay connected. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, virtually. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, email me if you have any questions at all. And now I'm really thrilled and really excited to hear from my colleagues and friends to talk a little bit more about their work and their career paths and the highs and lows and everything in between. So first we'll start with Ben.
Thanks so much, PJ. And thank you to Youth Art Exchange for having me and welcome to everyone. So my name is Benjamin Shaykin. I'm the lead graphic designer at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. And what that means generally is that I am responsible, or my small team within the marketing and communications division is responsible for all of the graphics outside of the galleries. So we don't generally do any of the things inside the gallery, the wall text or graphics, that sort of thing. But what we do is everything from the door to the gallery out into the world and beyond the world. Anyway, so if you could move on to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and where I started. So I went to college in Ohio at Oberlin College, and as a student, I had no idea that graphic design was a thing, much less a field. It was a thing I had always done. I started making posters and flyers and working on the literary magazine and things like that in high school. But I thought it was just a thing that I did instead of doing the work I was supposed to be doing. And it turned out that's actually a whole field and a way that you can make a living, which is a thing I discovered sort of in the course of my college career. They didn't offer any graphic design classes. It wasn't something people studied there. I was an English minor and an a combined art studio art history major. And I sort of think that that's kind of the equivalent of graphic design in a way, because you're thinking about how images and text mean things and how they can communicate. And so this is this amazing Klaus Oldenburg giant three-way plug that was outside of the wonderful art museum at Oberlin. And one of the things that I loved being an art major was that I would have to I got to walk through the museum almost every day on my way to classes. And I just love that sense of just like being at home in the museum, I think. When I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I moved to San Francisco, and I thought I would either, I wanted to do something continuing to work with art, and I thought I would either work in a museum or be a graphic designer. Those were sort of in my mind what the options were. And I applied to a lot of things that I did not get. But if you go to the next slide, what I did get was an internship at Mother Jones magazine, which you have here on the left. It was like a 2-month internship, which turned into a year-long fellowship, which turned into like a 5-year job. And I ended up there for 5 years, working my way up to associate art director and being involved in a full-scale redesign that we did. So that's just like a stack of magazines. And I always loved, you know, doing things like being playful in the design. So this was an issue about protest. And so we had that little guy with the protest sign, and that became a place to hold the barcode for the magazine, things like that. Around the same time that I started at Mother Jones, 2 dear friends of mine from college started a magazine called Bitch, Feminist Response to Pop Culture. And they said, you know Quark, which was the software at the time. And I said, sort of, I'm learning it. And they said, great, you're our designer. And so I was the designer for Bitch magazine for the first 5 years of its existence. And it's now a nonprofit based in Portland and still exists and is distributed internationally, which is kind of amazing to me. But that was, so a tip that I can say is to follow sort of passion projects and things sort of outside of the standard job. You know, that was it. I didn't get paid to work on that. I did it because I loved it, but it was it has led to all kinds of relationships and opportunities later on, which was not at all what I had intended. Next slide, please. So after about 5 years at Mother Jones, I went to Chronicle Books, art and design publisher here in San Francisco. And worked on a whole bunch of books that were everything from sort of pop culture fun things like this visual history of bowling to more sort of serious design books like the one on the right. I was there for about 5 years and then moved to the East Coast with my family and went freelance. Go to the next slide, please. and worked for a number of years making art books and album covers and books for university presses. So it's just very small smattering of things. And I worked on my own for a number of years. And then next slide. I should say also, all of this was essentially being self-taught. You know, I had done this work, as I said, not knowing it was real work, and learned on the job at Mother Jones and taught myself how to do these things, making my own magazine. And I decided I wanted to teach. And so that became an opportunity to go back to graduate school. And so I actually can no longer claim to be a self-taught designer, because I did go to Rhode Island School of Design and got my MFA, and ended up teaching at RISD for about 6 years, and then moving back here. And I've been teaching part-time, in addition to my work at the museum, teaching at CCA in their grad and undergrad programs. Next slide, please. So I came to the museums in 2018, and as I said, part of my job is dealing with everything outside of the gallery, and so part of that is just how does the museum look to the public and to visitors? And so one really wonderful project that I was able to be part of was this set of translated maps that are in 9 different languages. And become a way to be welcoming to people from around the world, and to really make it a just a welcoming and inclusive place. We also made these buttons that match the maps that say welcome in the various languages, so that people who speak, people on the front line staff who speak a language other than English or no ASL can sort of promote that, and a visitor can know, like, oh, you speak German, I can talk with you. Next slide, please. A good portion of my work and our work is involved with promoting exhibitions. And so this was a major exhibition from 2 years ago, the Monet exhibition. If you were in San Francisco at the time, you were probably clobbered over the head with these graphics because they were everywhere. But it's everywhere from the front of the building to on the sides of buses to the lit sign in front of the museum to the shopping bags, everything like that. Advertisements in the newspaper, all the different ways to create awareness and excitement for the exhibition to bring visitors in. Next slide, please. So one of the other great things that we get to do is on the inner courtyard, if you've been to the De Young, there's a courtyard, huge window, and we were able to put up a full blow up of this Monet painting, which became this backdrop. It became like this huge successful thing that I was not expecting. Just people loved this like Instagram moment, which I naively thought was just, we were just putting a thing up on the wall, but it's actually a way that the museum can promote itself, and you can all, visitors can help promote the museum as well. So one other exhibition, if we can go on to the next slide, please. This next exhibition was up right until the day that we closed the museum for the first time for shelter in place. And it was an incredibly important exhibition I was really proud to be a part of, called Soul of the Nation. And in addition to creating this identity for the exhibition and putting it out into the world, you can see the main image was this amazing Barclay Hendrix portrait, the figure on the red background. Again, this was all around the city. This was a case where we did get to collaborate a little bit with the exhibition graphic designers. And so you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, they did actually use the typography that I had come up with for the exhibition as the sort of entry wall title, which was exciting. We do a lot of work, not just to promote the exhibitions, but for the education department, public programming, development, other places. And so we had a whole which I'm sure Renee and others will talk about, a very robust set of public programs involved with that, and I got to do the promotion for that. Also had the first time something I had made was turned into a jigsaw puzzle, which was insane. Because I could not do that puzzle at all. I could only do the part that you can see of the type, and the larger graphic was just really, really difficult. Next slide, please. I want to share one last part of it, which was this really special moment, which was as part of this exhibition, one of the this photograph on the left of the artist Cleveland Bellow, who had in the 70s had a grant, I believe, from the Oakland Museum to put up a whole bunch of billboards around Oakland of this figure. You know, the billboards don't exist anymore. There's this one photo of him sort of standing underneath it. And we had the idea to, you know, what if we sort of remade that billboard and put it back into the streets of Oakland and put it back out into the world. And so with the blessing of his widow and the gallery and collector who has both the photograph and the maquette that he had made, we were able to remake the billboard and put it up in downtown Oakland, which is what you see on the right. And then that, without any sort of promotional language or talking about the exhibition, but just a link to people could find out more about the artist and about the project. So that is me, and I will pass it on to the next person.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the organizers of this event for having all of us. My name is Francisco Rosas. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Internal Communications and Content Project Manager. So I work within the Marketing and Communications Department, but I also communicate and interact with everyone across the museum, public programs, curators, conservators. And this is a photo of me in front of that same wall that Benjamin just talked about. And this was a previous exhibition on contemporary Muslim fashion, where instead of the kind of giant Monet painting, it was featuring this really beautiful calligraphy treatment that was part of the exhibition Graphic Identity. And similarly, people love to take photos of that for their social media accounts as well. You can move on to the next slide. I'm sharing this because this is something I recently discovered in my parents' house and swiped to hang on my own wall. This is the earliest example I know of an artwork that I created, and I think it's from about when I was 4 years old. And I've always loved making art and always loved art from a young age. And I still think that this watercolor is probably the best piece of art I ever made, which is why I kind of stopped being an artist or practicing art and instead moved on to a career in art museums instead. You can move on to the next slide, please. So I'm sharing this slide to you all with some hesitation. In the museum field currently, and unfortunately, I think to some degree, there's kind of a very particular trajectory that you are kind of assumed to take to enter into the museum field. And that includes, you know, a lot of education. So, you know, I took an AP art history class when I was in high school. I have an undergraduate in art history and public relations. I went to graduate school and have a master's in arts administration, and recently did a program that's kind of continuing education. And throughout those times when I was in school, I interned at a whole lot of museums in Los Angeles and in Chicago. And I'm showing you this to kind of show that this was my trajectory to get to the museum field, but it's something that I also think is really problematic as well. And it's something that people, myself and a lot of my colleagues are kind of pushing against and fighting to change, because this amount of schooling and unpaid internships is really hard. And it privileges a certain kind of person from a certain kind of background. And that's something that I am really actively trying to shift the workplace that I work in, and to make it more welcoming for people from a whole lot of different backgrounds that maybe have this similar background in education and experience. And I will say, yes, tip in this chat, some of these were unpaid internships. And if I was to ever go back again, I would never take an unpaid internship. And I encourage all of you to never take an unpaid internship. The professional association that the museum field runs in has made statements about how they're no longer going to offer unpaid internships. And that's great that all of these museums have agreed that they're going to do it, but they still allow for some unpaid internships, which means that basically the rich kids get to go and work for free. But this is something that, you know, I would never assume or want anyone to work for free. And something that internally at the Fine Arts Museums I really advocate for as well, is that we need to completely end this unpaid internship program. So kind of in a transition moment with that, but yes, absolutely discourage you from ever taking an unpaid internship. And then I show you this slide also kind of to say, like, I thought I was doing everything right, you know, to set me up to get into the museum field. And then when I graduated from grad school, and you can go to the next slide, there was no jobs. And for a couple of years, I took kind of like some hustle side jobs. One of those was working concert merchandise booths at the various concerts around the Bay Area. It's hard labor, but, you know, fun because you get to listen to some cool bands. And then I also started bartending and serving, which let me kind of go on this lifestyle of being able to go on random road trips and everything. But I really didn't have kind of that next step that I assumed was going to happen, especially with all of doing these things the right way with internships and all the schooling. And it was actually when I was bartending that I kind of got my break into the Fine Arts Museums, because I was, you know, serving a woman who was then the director of PR at the Fine Arts Museums, and found out that she worked at the museums, and kind of ended up chatting her up. And she said, you know, oh, you think you know a lot about museums? And I said, well, yeah, actually, I kind of do know a lot about museums. And 2 weeks later, I had an interview with her, and a month later, I was working for her. So I just share this story with you to kind of share that, like, you can really prep as much as possible and think that you have this trajectory. And sometimes if there is this element of luck that you're serving someone a bottle of champagne and you strike up a conversation with someone, and that's what kind of is your break. So I wanted to share that with you. You can move on to the next slide. So again, I work in this, you know, position that's kind of vague, but also a lot of fun. So I'm sharing some images. I've worked within PR, so accompanying curators to go on, you know, local news stations. I've helped out with photo shoots, from kind of Vogue magazine photo shoots to this is an image of Fleet Week. I also do behind the scenes things like photo shoots. These are images of our conservators working on a dress and a painting. I help develop blog posts. I help do film shoots, produce videos, help with the social media and the website. You can advance to the next slide. And then I also really tried to integrate advocacy and activism into my work. So in addition to being a part of the marketing and communications department, I'm also part of a group of staff at the Fine Arts Museums called the IDEA Committee, which advocates for many things, but specifically right now, we're really involved with encouraging our leadership to take a more proactive approach to becoming an anti-racist organization. So promoting diversity, inclusion, all of those things, access as well. So these are some images of me at the San Francisco Pride Parade with my family. The museums walk in that parade every year, you know, with the exception of this year because of COVID. And then also just trying to be aware of the things that are culturally relevant that might not be museums, but are adjacent to us. And this is a picture of me standing in front of the empty plinth from where the Father Sarah sculpture was pulled down in Golden Gate Park. And I'm not advocating for or against the kind of removal of monuments, but just to be aware of what's going on in a larger environment of culture that we, are in locally. And that's all I got.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to PJ and Youth Art Exchange for organizing and inviting us. My name is Renee Villasenor. I'm the Assistant Manager of Public Programs at the Fine Arts Museums. Just as some background, I am a queer, non-binary, undocumented immigrant. And I always like to say that first because I like to bring my full self, my lived experience, and the communities I live with in everything I do. And so this photo that you see, the little star is me yelling in the background during actually one of our public programs for Soul of a Nation. That's actually the group Souls of Mischief, which was on the flyer that Ben added as well. They performed at the Young Museum as one of our big events on one of our free days. And I always like to think of public programs as a way to continue the conversation. So using the art as a starting off point in the space we are in, and where can we go from there? What stories can we tell? How do we connect with each other? And whether that be through a lecture, a performance, something hands-on. I think there's different ways for people to access that and to feel comfortable engaging with art and understanding that there's art all around us. It's not just the things that are on the wall that make these spaces and these moments like really important to us. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I grew up in Lancaster, California, which is a very small conservative town. And like I said, I'm undocumented. So my family didn't really go to a lot of museums, and Lancaster is it's about an hour north of LA. So doing anything like that is really expensive and kind of far. So in high school, I kind of did a lot of things, like did way too many sports, probably took like way too many AP classes, but there was really nothing else to do. So it worked to my advantage. And so when I was in high school, I have an older brother who was applying to college, and my parents let us know at that time we were undocumented. So it was a very, it was like a very serious moment in our lives, because at that point, Obama did not pass the DREAM Act. And eventually when I was a senior, he did pass it. So I was able to attend my local community college, which I would recommend for anyone to do if you're uncertain, is to take the time, especially in San Francisco, since City College is free for San Francisco residents. If you can't afford to go to a big university and you still want to go to school, I'd really take advantage of community college. And again, I was able to go because Antelope Valley College had a scholarship that paid for everything. So without that scholarship, I couldn't even afford to go to community college. But at that time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I liked enjoying art, so films and music, and I really liked my history class and like philosophy, but I didn't know what that meant, and like I went to like museums with my school groups, but I was just like, I don't literally have no idea what working in a museum means other than what a curator is, so I was just like, okay, like maybe I want to be a curator at a history museum, maybe not an art museum, no idea. So I entered community college as an anthropology major. If you didn't know, anthropology is the study of humans. So I was like, that's like vague enough and captures all of the things I like and I'm interested in. But when I was taking these classes so that I could transfer to a bigger school to get my bachelor's, I took an intro to contemporary art history class just to learn more because I liked art. And in that moment, everything kind of just like clicked and I was like, oh my God, like this is literally this is the thing that I like. It like combines all of my interests. And my professor at the time, who I'm still really great friends with, and she wrote my recommendation to get me some of my internships. She was just like, what are you doing being an anthropology major? Like, you're so good at this. And the way you talk about it, you're so excited. So I think her like mentorship and her guidance really helped formed a lot. And I think the relationship I built, like really, it took me on a trajectory that was very encouraging. So if we go to the next slide, please. While I was in community college, I would take, again, because my school paid for everything and my parents gave me a very small amount of money to go to this internship. I took a 3-hour train ride, which was very difficult, on the metro to go to an internship at the Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions, which is in Hollywood, which is an artist Artist Found Space, like a small art gallery that have changing things. And right there, it really like solidified that I really wanted to work in galleries or in museums. It was also the first time that I was part of a public program, both behind the scenes and as a participant. And I actually got to do a lot of things there, like on the far left, that's us setting up for an auction. So I got to do a lot of art handling. I did a lot of art installation. So I learned a lot of really great skills that I wouldn't have gotten at like in the town that I grew up in. And when I joined, I didn't really know what to expect. But like Francisco said, you know, there's a lot of unpaid labor, and it was a lot of really hard work for me. And I was just really glad because I had that scholarship, I was able to afford to do this. But one of my mentors there, one of my early queer mentors, I would say, she actually introduced me to the graduate program she was in that I later applied to, that she wrote a recommendation for. And we're still friends. We like see each other when we go to LA, when we could go to LA, or if she's in San Francisco. If we go to the next slide, please. And then so after I was able to transfer to San Francisco State, I got my bachelor's in art history there. And so during that time, I took an exhibition design class, which combined a lot of the skills I learned at LACE and applied it to the things I learned in school. And this class was it was like my first introduction to the Bay Area art scene. My family didn't travel a lot because we didn't have a lot of money. So I didn't really know what to expect when I moved up here. And it was like my first time living alone. So it was very exciting for me. So I did a lot of art installation, you know, got to talk to a lot of like living artists, handle a lot of really amazing work like Wallace Berman's Semina series, which was like really wild, as well as meeting Emory Douglas, who is the administrator of culture for the Black Panthers. And at that time too, I did a public programs internship at the Fine Arts Museums, which is also unpaid. And the only reason I was able to afford doing this is because I was working retail. I was full-time in school, and at SF State, they gave me a scholarship that paid for everything as well. So I was really lucky as well to be able to take internships that didn't pay me. But that really kind of solidified all these things that I learned, like talking to people at auctions, like talking with people in hand, and seeing people in museums, like talking to each other, engaging with the artwork, and just like there's a large community of people together and like thinking about what art can do was really amazing. And at that time as well, I worked on a special exhibition on Alcatraz, which was site specific, called At Large by Ai Weiwei, that dealt with a lot of really contemporary political moments and like prisoners of conscience. You can see me at the top. There's those photos on the floor are actually made of like thousands of Lego pieces. So getting to talk to people like one-on-one, because a lot of people who went didn't really understand what this art meant. And I think about my parents who, like, if they went, they wouldn't understand. If it was younger me, like, I would not understand. So it really gave me the tools to like talk to people about art and like how to engage with people who don't know what art means, to see that it's like really important to them and that it can tell them a lot of things, or they can learn a lot of things that they might not know, which of my retail jobs came really much in handy there. And if we could go to the next slide, it's my last slide. I eventually graduated from San Francisco State and ended up going to grad school at CalArts, California Institute of Arts in Southern California. My program was called Critical Theory, Aesthetics, and Politics, which is a mouthful, but essentially is like art history meets philosophy, you know, and everything we talk about, like why art does this or who's doing it for, and all these things we talk about politically now, and who gets what, why, when, how, was everything we talked about in my grad school program. And I think asking those questions and all these experiences I've had, and like who I am as a person, and all the things that, like the systems that were built against like most marginalized people of color, I bring with me to my work, and we're like, okay, how do I change that? So currently at the Fine Arts Museums, you'll see a screenshot of one of our Instagram story features of me. Last year, we did a Pride program. It was a month-long program, and one of our programs was a documentary, a VR documentary about trans people, which was really, really fun for me to enjoy. But I think a lot of the work I do now is try to really bring whoever's here locally, and I always think about like those people those relationships that I had and the people that I talked to, and like, how do I get it so that when my parents come to the museum, they have like such a full experience here, you know? And I think about that all the time and everything that I do, and making the museum a space where everyone can have that with or without me, or with me there as well, and digitally, hopefully. But that's all for me, and I'll pass it to Sarah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Kleiner, and I'm the Associate Paintings Conservator. And you can see I get to work with amazing colleagues every day. So thank you for including me. Can I have the next slide, please? So that's me looking under the microscope at a painting, and I'm with one of our curators, Melissa Biron. And curators and conservators work very closely together. Curators have an art history background, and they're responsible for sort of the content behind exhibitions. They create publications. Conservators are more hands-on, so I actually do the restoration or treatment of works of art and study how things are made and help travel works of art safely. I'll have the next slide, please. By far and away, the most exciting part of my job is getting to hold works of art. So I unframe them, I turn them over, I look at the edges, and that's such an intimate relationship to have with the work of art. You know, one of my favorite things is that I can read everything that I can find on a particular artist or piece of art, and then I get to actually sit with the real thing in front of me and decide, you know, what's true about what's written about it, or what's new information. And that is just completely thrilling. I'll have the next slide, please. Conservators use a variety of scientific techniques to study works of art, and I just wanted to give you one example. This is a painting by James Tissot. He's a 19th century French artist, and it's in the Getty's collection. And the black and white image is an X-radiograph. So that's like if you break your arm and you get an X-ray, well, we use the same thing on paintings. And what this is showing you is that you can look through the paint layers and you see those like large sweeping brush marks, and you can see how the ground layers are applied to prepare the canvas to receive paint. And then going back into the history books, looking at what kind of tool makes those marks. So none of that is visible on the surface of the painting. I'll have the next slide, please. This is me. I think I was about 19 in this picture. I went to Colorado College. I was a studio art major, and I was kind of just a maker. I always was making something super crafty. Thought I was completely terrible at science, took the minimum amount of science in college just to graduate. Next slide, please. But my last class at CC was this art history class on Italian Renaissance altarpieces. And the professor, Marvin Eisenberg, he really focused on like the physical properties of works of art and what that could tell you about something's history or how it changed over time. And I didn't know at the time that that was actually in a book called Art in the Making, and it's a whole series of books that you can probably get on Amazon. Can you go to the next slide, please? But I was completely captivated by the fact of these just really tangible aspects. Like those paintings are made out of wood panels, and where the panel comes from can change if you go to the next slide. So this is the back of a panel and of a panel painting. And then if you could go backwards to the wood slide. So that panel is curving because it was probably a tangential cut of wood. And you can see why it kind of wants to go back on the tree. And that if you find a panel that's a radial cut, even from looking at this picture, you can see why that might be more stable. And in fact, that says something about the commission, that it was a more expensive commission. So just these really practical, it sort of demystified art for me and connected me to the making. Can you go forward, please? And then forward again. So after college, I moved to Seattle and I was working at the Seattle Art Museum. I got a job as a summer camp teacher in the art program because that's what I had experience doing when I was in college. I originally thought I would go into art therapy for kids, but ironically, I was terrible at science, or I thought I was, and so I avoided doing that. And the museum was building a conservation studio. So I was there for 7 years and I spent 5 years in conservation I'll second Renee's plug for community college. I was taking one science class at a time at night, falling asleep on the bus to get there, which was like an hour ride, just to get all my prerequisites for graduate school. I'm proud to say I never had any unpaid internships. So I was lucky in that respect. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I went to a graduate program at the University of Delaware and Winter. It's one of 3 programs in the United States for conservation, and there's about 8 or 9 students each. One amazing thing about this program is if you get in, it's paid for. So that was really good because I didn't have any school debt. The reason I have the picture of the stool is that conservation is often referred to as a 3-legged stool between art history, studio art, and chemistry. So I actually got my Master's of Science, which was for me a huge accomplishment because it turned out that I loved chemistry and I was really good at it. I just had terrible high school art, chemistry teachers. And some of the people in my program, had originally been pre-med, so you can come at it from any angle. Mine happened to be studio art. Can I have the next slide, please? My 3rd year in graduate school was an internship, and I did mine at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And when I went to go interview there, Michael Gallagher, who was the head of paintings conservation, pulled out this painting, which is small. I want to say it's like a foot tall. And it turns out that it is the first painting ever made by Michelangelo. He painted it when he was about 12 or 13 years old. And it was 2 feet in front of me, unframed on a table. And so again, that feeling of just total overwhelm of being connected to a maker. And Michael did something for me that I hope that I can pay forward, which was we were walking through the galleries on the way out and he offered me the internship on the spot, which is like, I'm really going to do that for somebody one day when it's my turn. Anyway, go on to the next slide, please. After the Met, I was there for 3 years. I have been at the Fine Arts Museums for 8 years. And this is one of my current projects. It's a huge painting that was used in tapestry production. And this is Kat Harada, our fellow. We're working on formatting issues with the painting. But one thing I wanted to leave you with, if you go to the next slide. So it took me about 20 years working in museums to get to where Renee already was, probably all along, of just bringing your whole self to work. And this is a picture of me with my kids. I cannot separate the fact that I am a white Jewish woman and the mother of 2 Black children, and I carry that with me in everything that I do as I approach my work. And what I've learned as I've gone through my profession is that our profession has historically been, the pipeline into conservation has been really white. And that is hugely problematic because when you think about what we're charged with of preserving cultural heritage and which history to prioritize, I wanted to show you this illustration in the monument. Do you clean off the graffiti and honor the original monument? Do you preserve the graffiti as part of its history? Do you remove the monument altogether? And where does it go? What resources get devoted to that, which, museums never have enough resources. So that means something else doesn't get resources. So it's really important, my profession is in a reckoning right now because who's in charge of cultural heritage is incredibly important. And we need so many different voices than what we have now. So I think I'll conclude there.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for really such a rich presentation and sharing your work, your trajectory. I had a list of questions, but I think all of you in different ways really touched upon all of them. But I want to just ask a few questions, and then I'm hoping we can open it up as well. So the first thing that I guess I'll just ask is, how has the pandemic and COVID-19 changed your day-to-day work or your work in general? So maybe we'll start with Renee, and then move on my screen, and then yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of my work had to do with bringing people on site. So it's been very different, and pivoting when people are spread across the country, and like, how do you support your community from afar without, if I don't have the resources immediately to give, like, what does that mean? And I think that means like highlighting other people's voices and sharing them on the platforms we do have. And, I think it's like a lot of learning and a lot of listening, and just like asking people, like, what do you need? And like, what do you want? And how can I support you? And I think that's something we always do, but especially now, I think that's been really important in what I do.
And I want to give you a plug. Renee and the public programs team have set up an amazing podcast series and event series as well. So still continuing those engagements for folks. Anybody else? Francisco? Ben?
Yeah, I'd say that the things that we do for content have just been trying to put out more digital content. So again, partnering with public programs and the education team, but in a way it's been nice for our colleagues in other departments to realize, like, oh yeah, we do want to spend time helping to write blog posts or appearing on the museum's social media accounts, because right now we're unable to have people on site physically. And so I'm hoping that if there is a silver lining to this tragedy in a lot of ways, in a selfish way, and just for the work that I do, it's that people want to be more involved with the digital aspect of it and connecting with their audiences online.
Yeah, I mean, similarly for me, I think so much of my work before was about making physical things that, were either printed or manufactured and put up around the building. And now so much of my work is digital, either, to support digital programming or to actually create videos. I've been doing a ton of work with our education department, all of their summer camp and all of the things that they would normally do with school groups, bringing kids in to do art projects, we're now sending out as video. And so I've become a video producer and editor as a large part of what I do. So.
I'm still going in and working on paintings. I have deadlines. So I probably go in 2 to 3 days a week. And then the other thing that I've been doing a lot during this time is just being really invested in anti-racism efforts in the arts and in conservation. And there's just so many amazing public programs. And one thing that's been positive about COVID is you can go to everything now because it's online. So it doesn't matter what country or what state it's in. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that too.
Awesome. And then maybe I'll ask one more question and then see if we can, if there are any questions, feel free to drop them or ask. I think this is, all of you really wanted to kind of, part of it is also highlighting that, a career in museums, it's still a field, and as most fields and institutions replicate kind of the injustices in real life, right? So I wanted to ask maybe each of you just to think of maybe, is there one thing that you wish museums would really change or would do better at? I know there's a lot, but if there's one thing that maybe, you know, that you think, yeah, would really, you wish our spaces and our museums would do better at. Take your time.
I can go ahead. So I have a lot of opinions on that. If anyone wants to know more, you can send me an email, or you can ask PJ to send me an email. We can connect. So I'd say, I think right now, I would say two of the things that I really care about is divesting in a lot of money that is really bad money, you know, whether that comes from money that comes from creating war machines, etc. You know, I'd say that's one of the big things is like divesting in money, because no matter how good things you do, that the water is toxic, you know? So I think that's one thing for me that I always think about in my work. And I also think a lot about wish museums would be more honest about their histories and things that they have either intentionally or unintentionally have perpetuated and created these systems that kept people out and continue to keep people out, and not just being honest about it, but doing something about it, whether that means through equitable pay, like, you know, like getting rid of some objects, returning them. I think there's a lot that you can do there, but I think the starting point is at least being honest about it, you know, and saying that these are the things, and at least finding out about it. If they don't know, you know, is at least figuring that out to start off with.
Across the industry, I think something that I think would be an easy win, especially as COVID is really messing a lot of our funding structures, and a lot of nonprofits and art nonprofits are having to do financial belt tightening, is I wish that a lot of the more traditional folks and people that have maybe been in the industry for a really long time that are past due retiring, I kind of wish that they would step down and get out of the way. Their salaries are both really expensive, and when those people at the top who've been in the system for a really long time refuse to step aside to make room for kind of new ideas and new thoughts and new people, I think that that really hinders a lot of the work that I want to see us move forward with.
Any other?
I think that yeah, we need to get more honest and bold, and I don't want to talk about diversity. I want to talk about anti-racism, and I think that conservators and curators, their voices carry a lot of weight in museums. Certain voices carry a lot of weight. Board members' voices carry a lot of weight. And I think there's a lot of expertise throughout the museum, and I would like that to be distributed more equitably. I think we could probably solve more of our problems if we did that.
I'll just say one thing. I think everything that's been said has been really true. I think I think we are not alone in this, but I think there is such a reliance on the blockbuster, you know, on the Monet or the, you know, show that is to drive, you know, ticket sales and that sort of thing, and to move away from that model so that we're able to give equal weight or more weight to the other things that we're doing, and to free up resources, you know, to you know, in my case, promote, but you know, to let the world know, you know, all of the good things that are happening.
All right, I'm going to open it up to youth questions.
I have a quick question. As somebody who is kind of unsure of what I want to do, this all sounded so exciting to me. What would be a good way to kind of start, like during high school right now, I'm a junior, would be a good way to start like getting involved if I want to do something like this, like you guys do?
I think I was a groupie for museums. I always love museums. There's so many programs and internships. And I think just starting to like show up. And as Francisco said, I mean, he was in a bar and he met somebody, but if you're actually, you know, in person or even online, like ask your questions, show up and participate, and you will get to be part of the community too. And certain things will carry you. You'll be interested in them. And then you just keep pursuing those.
I'm gonna do oh.
Sorry, I just have one quick thing. I would say continue to like support groups like Youth Art Exchange and like smaller non-profits that focus really on youth and like people who are really interested in the art community as well as the other communities you exist in. Because without the support of like the local people there, those museums don't have anything to stand on. So I think if you really look at where you are and like work with like groups like Youth Art Exchange, you'll really get a sense of what you like to do, as well as people who like to do that, who are maybe around the same age as well. So that's something I would probably recommend. Sorry.
No, I wanted to just also plug my job and my role. So we, you know, most museums have teen programs. They have workshops, events, things, and internships. So, you know, try them out. Go to those events. I mean, it doesn't even have to be at the fine arts museums. You know which museums you're interested in, what are local, what's closest, you know, to what you're interested in, and you know, yeah, go attend. The work that Youth Art Exchange does is very connected, and then hopefully, I'm committed to also having internships that are paid. Last summer we worked with 10 high school students from the Bay Area, and we paid them through a partnership with the city of San Francisco. So, watch out for all those events. And see, you won't know which ones is the right fit until you try kind of a variety of them. So I would just say, yeah, kind of follow social media, follow teen museum social media. They have a lot of cool events happening, especially now since we're almost all virtual. Yeah. I think that's it.
I have a quick question if you still have time.
Okay.
Awesome. Here, I'll throw my video on, super face to the name. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Flores. I'm a senior student at the Academy of Art, just about to graduate soon with my BFA in graphic design. So this question is more for Ben, but could you shed some light a little bit on the roles available for graphic designers in the art industry, the art role with museums and galleries? You mentioned that you worked on communications outside of the museum, and there's also opportunities to work inside with exhibit design. So could you kind of shed some light on the opportunities available?
Sure. I mean, briefly, I think the way that our museum is split, and I think a lot of museums are split that way, is you have graphic designers who are exhibition graphic designers who work alongside exhibition designers to design the actual exhibition. So that's one sort of world. Then there's my world, which is in communications and marketing, which I spoke to. And then there's publications would be the third side. And we at the Fine Arts Museums don't actually have any publications designers on staff, but so that work is all done freelance or out of house. Though since COVID, I've been doing our member magazine, and we've brought that in-house. So those are sort of the three sort of worlds that I'm aware of, within our museum. I think other museums, SF MoMA might be a little more integrated, where I think it's more one department that sort of shares all of those tasks, distributed throughout. Yeah, so it really depends. And then just around the country, I know I have friends and colleagues who are at a small museum in, Texas or wherever, and they are the one designer on staff and they do everything, which is kind of amazing to me. And I, there's part of me that is like, oh, I want to be able to touch and be part of everything and have it all be consistent. But also we are two museums, on two different sites, and we have, lots of exhibitions when we're open. So it's a lot harder to do. I don't know if that answers any of your questions, but feel free to email if there's other questions.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. It's a bit of a specific career goal, and so there isn't a lot of information out there. So this is all really helpful.
Feel free to email, and that's true for anyone.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I recognize it's past 4 o'clock. So if anybody maybe has any last questions, and I know if Youth Art Exchange wants to plug some more of your other events, you're welcome to close us out as well. But that's it for us. Francisco had to leave for a meeting, but I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes.